my fellow citizens of all nations. Right now I'm going to talk about Sigmund Freud's The Unconscious. It is very interesting work, and first let's start with explaining the unconscious itself. When we talk about Freudian psychology, things are very different. And there are other schools which disagree with Freudian psychology or don't like generally Freud. But let's just leave that part alone right now. We're talking about The Unconscious by Sigmund Freud here. And let's bring the definition of the unconscious, because the title of the work is The Unconscious. Usually when people think about unconscious, now obviously most of the people don't know much about it or think about the unconscious a lot. But those who do, and the way we are taught this is this way. Basically, you may think about the iceberg. We think about the unconscious as something that is beneath the iceberg, so something that we cannot see, and the floating part as a consciousness. And this was the kind of model I had in my mind when I was reading this work, that it's kind of the unconscious is kind of that. No. And I realized that the way I was interpreting the unconscious in my head was very wrong. And this approach toward the unconscious is simply no. Unconscious is very, very broad term, and it cannot be exactly defined, and neither you should measure it that way. Just think about it as something that is there, but we cannot say like what's the size of it or etc. or what influence it has. Just think about it this way. Let's say 13 memories. Think about anything right now. For example, your childhood friends, and remember the kindergarten or your school period, your classmates. Or think about something you learned when you were very young, or how you were playing. When I've started talking about it, in my memory, those images started to pop up in my head. But the question is, where those images come from, like where they were. Like it's clear that at the conscious moment, essentially as a person I'm talking to you right now, I did not have those memories in my mind. I was talking to you, in fact. But the moment I brought up this example, and I've started to talk to you about it, to make the point, and these images started to pop in my head, and probably it started to pop in your head as well, or you started to think about it. Where were those information? So it's obvious that information was stored somewhere, and that place is unconscious. That's where it is stored, essentially, because we are not constantly aware of those memories. They are somewhere there. They are in unconscious, and this would be kind of to make sense of what unconscious would be. Now, there is also the thing about unconscious and the conscious mind, which Freud brings very interestingly. And he refers to it as the preconscious, or the way I like to think about it is like rejected, basically something that gives permission. Okay, let's say there is, and what it also implies is that just like we brought this example, and there were certain thoughts and images that popped in our head when we mentioned those in kindergarten, etc. Kindergarten. Okay, try to remember your kindergarten, like what it looks like, how it was, etc. Now, the thing is that independently, some sort of thoughts and memories also pop up. Or it can be some painful memories. And it passes the preconscious, and it enters your consciousness. And let's say it's something very uncomfortable, like what and it came from unconscious independently. You did not want you to remember those parts. And if it's something very negative, you'll be like, no, 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 no. You're like, if it passes if it enters your consciousness, that's from the vivid memories, a very tragic thing. If you had those type of experiences, or like your mind is no, 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 no. It tries to push it back, like no, it rejects it. In theory, there should be something that rejects some thoughts without us knowing it, and that can be understood as preconscious. Now, there's a couple things I want to share with you here as well. Now, let's talk about everything repressed has to remain unconscious. But let us state from the very outset that the repressed does not constitute the whole of unconscious. The unconscious is the more extensive. The repressed is one part of unconscious. Obviously, unconscious is a broader term, which I already said, but there is also those things, those traumatic experiences, those tragic things or bad things, etc. I mean, it can be something like rejection. Let's say you liked someone and you confess your feelings, and you're like, I like you, please go out with me, and you're like, and you answer you get was like, no, I don't, whatever, and it was very painful for you. So it would remain in your memory. Now there is also the thing he says about acts that are not registered by consciousness. It is, I mean, generally when I think about it, like, such a fascinating thing is we general human beings know so little about ourselves. I mean, there is so much more going on. And I also I don't know why I started to think about it, but the point is that what if there is a genetic memories directly related to unconscious that somehow makes us behave certain way, and it's in genetic cause. Like, what if that is true? Like, what if that is so as well? You know, it's a very, it would be a very strange thing and very interesting discovery. Now, the difference stems entirely from the fact that ideas are investments of energy. Basically, in memory traces, whereas emotions and feelings correspond to processes of discharge whose ultimate expressions are perceived as sensation. So, like, think about some sort of the mechanisms, right? Or programs. This is what's going on. And right now I want to share with you this very, very interesting story about this patient he had. Not he, but a certain person. Basically, she was a patient that has problems. And now let's understand what was going on about her situation. One of Tausk's patients, a girl brought to the clinic after a quarrel with her lover, complains. Her eyes are not right, they are twisted. She herself explains this by producing incoherent language, a series of reproaches against her lover. She just cannot understand him. He looks different every time. He's a hypocrite, a deceiver. He has twisted her eyes. Now she has twisted her eyes. They are no longer her eyes. She sees the world with different eyes now. And last part, also the philosophical, it's very interesting thing. Like, she sees the world with different eyes right now. And this whole story is very interesting, philosophical as well. And there's two more things. Let's say her reality, like it wasn't very pleasant. Like, real life, is real life so great? And she created better life. Let's assume that what she did, like, that she created in her imagination the perfect partner and etc. that she wanted to have. Now, the third part would be what I mentioned. Like, would be like, why should anyone go up to the type of patient and be like, hey, come back to real world? It's so fun. Like, it's just interesting to think about it. because we usually want to assume that just because somebody is like not acting just like everybody else, we have to somehow bring that person back. Now there was a very specific patient, and basically the fetishes and type of sensations that person felt. And there was this thing that made me think about castration and fear of castration, and how important the sexual organs are for human beings generally. And there's also the thing that how in certain period of history of Europe, fathers, for example, threaten their children, and especially to the young men, that hey, if they saw him masturbating, they would threaten him that way, that I will castrate your penis because you're masturbating. And how profound fear is it, and how the castration and general fear of castration also brings like immense fear, and also it also proves how we are very biological creatures, because and how much it matters, because like your existence comes to question. And also how many people have he was talking about fetishes, but the thing is that like how many people have like traumas related to that, they could not express their sexuality properly. Or let's say there was this patient he was talking about, basically, where when he was very young, a much older girl had some sort of a relationship with him, basically, and once and how he developed those things, etc. Like how generally people were suppressed, men and women generally were suppressed, and obviously other sexualities as well. But especially generally like human beings, like their sexuality was like super suppressed. And what type of traumas and etc. it brought to what type of traumas and things it would bring to humans. Like it's very interesting, and how these certain experience can make a person question their existence, or like bring so many emotions and suffering and pain. So it's always interesting to have this in our mind. And now I want to read this part, which is very interesting. If we ask ourselves what gives schizophrenic substitute formations and symptoms their strange characters, we eventually realize it is the predominance of the word relation over the thing relation. As regards the things itself, there is very little similarity between squeezing a blackhead and ejaculation from the penis, and even less between the countless shallow pores on the skin and the vagina. But in the first instance, something spurts out each time, and in the second, the cynical saying "a hole is a hole" quite literally holds true. The substitute is determined not by the similarity between two things, but by their identity, when expressed in words. Where the two word and thing do not coincide, the process of schizophrenic substitute formation deviates from that in the transference neurosis. And just thing to have in our mind. And now, let me share this story, which is also very interesting and it's about negation and rejection and etc. Now, the manner in which our patients present their associations during analytical work gives us occasion for some interesting observations. Now, you'll think I want to insult you, but I really don't mean to. This, we realize, is a thought being rejected as it emerges by means of projection. Or you ask who this person in my dream can be. It's not my mother. This we are meant. So it is your mother. In our interpretations, we take the liberty of disregarding the negation and seizing on the pure context of the thought. It is as if the patient had said, "My first thought was, it's my mother, but I have no desire to admit this." Very interesting, right? There is no stronger evidence that the unconscious has successfully been uncovered than when the patient reacts with the words, "That's not what I was thinking," or "I was not thinking, have never thought any such things." Basically, the patient thought that. Now, there's also the thing about this type of rejection, like, "Oh, I don't want to do it." Sometimes, it's like sometimes, basically, what the patient was denying was in fact what the patient wanted or thought, or so, or was that way. Now, think about dreams as well. Is that basically it assumes that our dreams, which cannot be planned, okay? Like Freud would call the dreams that can be planned utter absurd. We're talking about dreams that spontaneous dreams, and dreams should always be spontaneous. But there are some people basically they say well, we can like plan our dreams, etc. So this is a clear distinction to make because we're talking about Freudian psychology here. The thing is that now dreams sometimes basically dreams, not sometimes, but dreams represent inner desires, usually. So what you dream about represents your state of being and what you exactly need or want. So it's very interesting. So if you have dreams, like pay attention to them because they may be your inner desires or the answers to your questions, because unconscious is providing them for you. So it's a very interesting thing. Basically, it's like unfulfilled desires. This is how it can be understood as well, what dreams are. And now this is the Greek mythology, and I found this story interesting. So let me share it with you. It is impossible not to be reminded here of an archaic piece of Greek mythology, which tells us how the old father god Kronos swallowed his children and also wanted to devour his youngest son Zeus, and how Zeus, rescued by his mother's cunning, subsequently emasculated his father. Now it's rescued by his mother's cunning, subsequently emasculated his father. Now, very interesting. Now, this is all the notes I wanted to share with you. And at the end, I want to say that you should definitely check this work out and read it yourself if you found this interesting. And if you read it already, or maybe you're a professional in this sphere, and you have some points you want to make and share your knowledge or observation or some sort of interesting things you noticed and you connected those things to other things as well, like for example, like I was talking about iceberg example, share it with me, comment down below and let me know. And this is it for today, and see you in next video.